Hello, everyone. So I wanted to talk about the 9/11 address and this whole idea of political language because this is going to help you for your rough drafts and some of the things that I wanted to talk about starting next week, but certainly we should talk about this week. Most importantly, some of the things that you want to think about are how politicians use certain words and phrases. They love to use certain words and repeat them often for a reason. In this 9/11 speech, one of the first things that you will see is that they use the word terrorist quite often, and the word evil appears quite a few times in this essay. And I'm going to do something called Control F, and I'm just going to look up the word evil, and it's going to show up every time. As we see here, it says 1 out of 4. So that means it was used 4 times in this essay. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil. The word evil here obviously is a very negative term, right? And I'll be talking a little bit about the differences between literal interpretation of words and then what we call connotation. Here's the next one. Today, our nation saw evil. There it is again. And of course, evil is not used in a good sense, right? The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. So you have to think about the president at the time uses these words for a particular reason, right? The word evil often gives us a certain emotion. But I want to do something here. And I realize that this may not make sense to most people, but I'm going to look up the definition of evil. And this is what we call the literal or definition, right? Profoundly immoral and wicked. There's even a movie called Evil. Go figure. But now let's do evil, and I'm going to use the word connotation. So I'm going to look up what a connotation is first, because a connotation is the sort of implied. And by the word implied, I'm saying it's not obvious, but when you hear a certain word, certain ideas come to your mind. When you hear the word freedom, certain words and certain ideas and certain ideals come into your mind, right? An idea or feeling that a word invokes, in addition to its literal or definition meaning. So, what are some connotations of evil? Let's see. So you want to write this down. What does evil mean to you? When you hear the word evil, what do you assume it means? Evil. Actually, we should do maybe words that connote evil. Let's see if that actually shows up with something. Villainous, corrupt, degenerate, iniquitous, nefarious, vicious, highly reprehensible or offensive in character, nature, or conduct. Notice that it doesn't say anything about being immoral in this sense, right? So the idea is that the connotations will give you certain emotions, right? And let's just look back at the 9/11 address, and let's see if we can see some of these examples here. So let's try another word here. I'm going to use the word freedom, which shows up almost as many times as evil. So the first time it says our very freedom. And if you look at the 9/11 notes I sent you, I did the literal interpretation of the 9/11 address. What is our very freedom? Our very freedom came under attack. What is our very freedom? How was it attacked? Right? So let's look at the next one here. And again, you got to think about what freedom means literally in a definition and what we assume it means in our minds when we hear it. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world. So let's look up the word freedom. Let's see what it means. The power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. In this case, do we really have freedom? Because I'm pretty sure we also have something called laws which prevent us and restrain us from doing certain things. So the way that we assume freedom means, we often think it means free or being open, right? So these sorts of words can mean one thing, but they can imply other ideas, right? And again, the word freedom is used for a very specific purpose. Go forward to defend freedom. And here's some of my favorite. And all that is good and just in our world. These are all very positive words. This final paragraph, or I should say the end of this paragraph, uses a lot of positive language. Examples: unite, justice, peace, defend, freedom, good, just. And so these words are all positive, right? So why is it so negative in the beginning, but so positive towards the end? And politicians do this a lot. Politicians do this for a reason. They're trying to say, here's the problem, and they do so through negative language. Here's the problem. Here's how we're addressing the issue, and here's the solution, right? So they do things in a very bite-sized way so that anyone can kind of follow the way that they do things, which is very important because they want people to listen to them. And so they will use very distinct language, but at the same time, and this is made more clear in Politics in the English Language by George Orwell, they sometimes use words that have weird, odd metaphors that maybe not everyone understands. So I'm going to go down here and show you what I'm talking about. So there's a thing called metaphors. So let's look up what a metaphor is. A simile and metaphor are very similar. A metaphor is a figure of speech, and by figure of speech, we're saying that you don't take it literally, right? You're not supposed to take the phrase literally. A figure of speech in which a word or phrase, and phrase just means about 3 words combined, is applied to an object or action to which it is not literally defined. So here are 2 really good examples. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations, and this is the key word here, right? Can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings. That's a literal translation. But, and here's the counter argument, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. And notice that I put, what is the foundation? Is it made of concrete or mortar? The idea is that if you listen to this literally, what is the foundation of America? We have no idea. It's implied that the foundation of America is to be free and also to be strong. By the way, we should actually look that up, the word strong. You could do this on your own. You can look this up and see how many times strong is being used in this speech. I think the second one really brings it home. And I'm actually going to say this is the third metaphor. Okay. But the second one really brings it home for me. And it's the reason why I chose this essay. These acts, and they're referring to terrorist acts, shatter steel. That literally did happen. They broke through the buildings, which were made of steel. But they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. Well, what is the steel of American resolve? And notice that it's S-T-E-E-L. Steel is, I'll just do an image here for steel. The Steelers. Yeah, it's just metal, right? It's metal. Very strong metal. But is America made of metal? That's not what we're talking about literally, right? So what is the steel of American resolve? What he's saying is that the steel is to be strong despite anything that occurs to us. And this is actually very useful for the novel, which we'll be looking at the end of the semester, which is called Annihilation. And this third metaphor is a very interesting one. He uses the word brightest beacon. I really want to emphasize this here, so I'm going to do that. We are the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity. That's why they attacked us, right? And a beacon is a light. A beacon is a light that you would often see on a lighthouse or in a mountain. And it's supposed to shine and it's supposed to help people find their way across the sea, especially if it's stormy outside, right? Which is why lighthouses were invented. So it's a very important image for freedom, a symbol of freedom and opportunity. Again, it's not literal. We are not a light for freedom and opportunity in the world. We are like a light in that we let people know what it means to be free and to have opportunities, which is why we will keep that light shining. Because he says they tried to stop us, right? And so um, that's basically one of the greatest things that I wanted to tell you is that when Bush did this, there's a couple of things that went on in context that you should know about. One, no one knew really what happened. We just knew, and it wasn't until about the second plane hit the Twin Towers that most people realized it was considered a terrorist act. When we watched it from home, it looked like a demolition derby in Las Vegas. Sometimes they used to smash buildings down because they were too old or they'd get rid of them. And so for many people early in the day, because this happened around 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, at least when the second one went down, in Los Angeles in California, when we saw it, we didn't know what was going on. But when the second tower fell, we knew something was wrong. And that's when everyone started freaking out. Another thing we did not know was why it is that they were targeting New York, because almost all the flights were actually supposed to come to California. They were not intended for New York because they were much bigger planes. And so the airplane flying into buildings was something we had never seen before. Most people at the time, if they were going to do what we call a terrorist act, they would often what they call hijack a plane, which means they take over, and they would often tell people, okay, land us at a certain airport and we'll demand like $250,000 for everyone to get off the plane. And this is what most people expected in a sort of terrorist situation. No one at the time really expected them to actually fly the plane into a building. They even say there's there's a black box where the terrorists even tell people just calm down, just calm down. We're going to tell them we're going to go back to the airport and we're going to make some demands. And so most people thought, okay, it's going to be like, even though it wasn't that common, that was the sort of thing that had happened up to that point. And so the people were rather complacent about some of these things. And it was very unexpected that the Twin Towers, which have been well known as very huge buildings, no one ever thought it could crumble. In around 1995, when Bill Clinton was in office, there were a group of terrorists who did try to blow up the Twin Towers, but it failed. And so people thought this can never ever happen to the Twin Towers again. Unfortunately, about 6 years later, it actually did happen, and it was very, very tragic. It was all over the media, and so at night after the first day, most people obviously ran home from work. Not everyone did, but most people were afraid, right? They were afraid. And he also talked about an unyielding anger, which I want to talk about, because this quiet, unyielding anger certainly helped the Bush administration when they decided to invade Iraq. Many people probably would have not supported it had it not been for the 9/11 attacks. So he's trying to tell the people, I know how you feel, right? One of the things you'll notice about politicians is they will always try to tell you how you feel. And one of the ways that they also bring you into the situation is not by saying, my team of people is coming together. They will say, our people or we. So let's look at the word our. Look at how many times our is used. 22 times. Let's look at the word me, which is used in a similar way. Me is not used once in this essay. Not once. There is one time he uses I. 2 times I. 3. So let's look up the word I. I is used, let's see here. How many times is I used here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wow, only 8 times. Oh my goodness. So I is actually only used 8 times, but our is used 22 times, which means our is probably the most used word in this speech. Now I want you to question, why is our used? What is the purpose of using this sort of what we call pronoun? Why doesn't he say me or you or them or they? Why our? What is the purpose of our? I'll tell you why. And you can write this down. This is great stuff for politicians and future politicians and those currently in office. They know that whenever they write a certain speech in advance, they always want to use the words we and our because it embeds someone or puts them in the situation that you're in. If he says, today I and my fellow citizens, I and your way of life, I and your very freedom came under attack, it doesn't have the same effect. When you say our, it sounds like you, me, and everybody around the world. Today, everyone, every fellow citizen, every way of life, every freedom came under attack. And so do you see, again, this is the literal definition is a pronoun, right? Our is just a pronoun. Instead of saying, today, we fellow citizens, we our way of life, we our freedom, instead of saying that, he says, today, our, right? So he's using it, and politicians love to use this language, to put people in the situation with them. So that way people don't feel left out, first off. But number two, it feels like you're speaking to a family member. It feels like you're speaking to someone who is like you. There's no separation from you and I in this word our, right? And so it's a very strong word that is used in politics for a reason. It's meant to make people feel stronger, and it's also meant to put them in the person's shoes, right? He's not saying, I have to deal with this. He's saying, all of us have to deal with it. And it's not just my country, it's our country. When you say it's my country is strong, versus our country is strong, it has a totally different level or connotation, a different feeling and emotion. So think about that when you reread this and look at some of the other things that they say. And we'll be talking about more about this next time. So hopefully this helped you learn more about how politics is used in the English language to get you to feel certain emotions, and also to embed you and put you in certain situations which they want you to feel emotions.